There can be a big difference in your Maffetone number and zone 2. And today I'm going to talk about the differences, and so that way you don't make some of the mistakes I've made and you don't quit using the method, because I do know the method works, and for some people it works extremely well. Hey, I'm David, I'm the plant-powered runner. I've been using the Maffetone method for a number of years. I've been able to increase my pace by 3 minutes at the same low heart rate. It works. There's another way to make improvements using heart rate training, and that's what we're talking about today. I'm going to put out a couple of disclaimers. First off, I am no coach. I am not a physiologist. I'm no doctor or any of those things. I am a runner like you who has done his best to improve with my fitness over the last 4 years. So there's some problems with MAF and Zone 2 and how they're calculated. And later on in the video, I'm going to explain one of the ways that you can really narrow down and find the right number that works for you. Because we all know that heart rate training can be a little confusing if you're just kind of starting out or you're kind of coming into it and you're like, what number do I use? There's just so many numbers that people throw out there. So I want to bring some clarity to some of that. So when I talk about MAF training, I'm talking about MAF training, maximum aerobic function. It is a term coined by Dr. Phil Maffetone, and basically what it's taking is, it's taking the arbitrary number of 180 minus your age. That will be your heart rate while you are out for your aerobic base running, okay? And so that's just a real simple, easy way. Now, if you want to factor in your fitness to a degree, if you've been improving, then you can add an additional 5 beats. If you have gained weight and you're over fat, as he says, then you have to reduce that by 10 beats. And so there's a little bit of massaging and playing with the number. That's one side, okay? So ideally you want to do that for a number of months to build your aerobic base. You want to get aerobically fitter in time using the same low heart rate, and you will. It does work, but you have to be patient with it. When you talk about zone 2 training, that's like all the rage as well these days, and I've talked about that on my channel a lot, along with the Maffetone method. It's important to know that we are all different runners, so we all come at this from a different point of view. So I know some of you are going to comment below and you're going to put in your opinion, and I appreciate that and I welcome that. There is a number, and I don't even like using the number because if you're a seasoned runner, you do understand that what I'm about to say is, it's kind of, no one really wants to use this number, but you go out on the internet and there's so many people that still talk about it. But I'm going to say this just because it's a very, very simple and easy way to deal with it. And so what I'm going to say is, you can take 220 minus your age, and that will be your maximum heart rate, okay? And then what you do is you massage it with some multiplications, and you come in with all of your other zones. Now 220 minus your age, it's kind of been debunked a long time ago, but I'm just using it for simplicity reasons. And later on in the video, I will show you how you don't need to use that number, but I think it's important that you do understand. So I have my notes, my computer is over here, so if you see me looking this way, that's why. So if you take 220 minus your age, let's use an example, right? 220 minus 47, it's 173 beats a minute. If you take 60% of that, it's 103. If you take 70%, it's 121 beats a minute. And that would be kind of your 60 to 70% range that you'd be running. 103 to 121. The difference, if I were to do that with my MAF number, so if I take the same thing, if I take 180 minus my age, for this example, it would be 180 minus 47, so that would give me 133. So I would have a range of 123 to 133. If I wanted to factor in my fitness, I would add an additional 5 beats if I've been running for 2 years and I haven't picked up any injuries or I haven't gotten sick, things like that. So that would be a range that I had used in the past, okay? But if you notice that my 220 minus my age, and then I factored in for my aerobic base zone, it was much lower. It was 103 to 121. And that, to me, was like really low, okay? And so my Maffetone pace would put me into a different realm. And so I kind of used that number. Now, the one thing that I did notice was I did have a gap in my running. I wasn't exactly the fastest runner, and I noticed that if I would go from a walking state to a running state, my aerobic fitness would really show because there was a huge gap and then I would have to run walk. That wasn't fun for me. And so I would kind of look at zone 2 and go, yeah, that's just not going to work, right? Now, I just kind of zoned in on this whole Maffetone thing, but I did have this gap in my fitness. So I had to run really slow, like the slowest I have ever run in my entire life. And it was excruciating. But if I wanted to get aerobically fit, and I wanted to do it in a very slow, methodical way to reduce the injuries, if I wanted to build up my aerobic base, and if I wanted to get faster at using the same low heart rate over time, I knew I had to have the patience and I knew I had to stick with it to see the results. Now, if I was going to be using zone 2, God, there'd be no way. I would have not stuck with that at all because I would just be walking and I'd be in my zone 2. It was hard. So I focused all on MAF. And this is where it gets a little interesting because, story time. A couple of weeks ago, I went out and I did a Kuros fitness test. I wanted to see where I was. I wanted to see where my zones were. I wanted to see my max heart rate. I wanted to see my threshold pace. I wanted to see all of it. I wanted to see how much faster I was at running using a low heart rate. Now, I didn't know what was going to happen because I'd done this test before and my max heart rate, I really didn't tax it out, just like I said in one of my other videos. But this time was going to be different. So now, using what's known as the Karvin Method, now if I've pronounced it wrong, I apologize. It's just the way it's going to go. But anyways, it's the Karvin formula. Now, this one uses your heart rate reserve, okay? It uses your max heart rate and your resting heart rate to calculate your heart rate zones, okay? So I'll give you an example. Again, I thought this was pretty amazing. So when I went out for this Kuros fitness test, my max heart rate was calculated at 192, okay? And I could see that as being pretty kind of spot on, right? Like I really pushed. It was a fantastic workout. Now you can go to a lab and you can get your fitness tested. You can find out what your lactate threshold is. You can find out what your VO2 max is. You can do all of that. But if you can't, look, do it on your Garmin watch. I mean, your Garmin watch I'm sure it's got a fitness test on there as well. You could do it and figure out what your zones are using heart rate reserve. Now, I looked at this as a fantastic way of seeing exactly where I was. So while I went out and I was able to achieve a threshold heart rate of 171, 172, my maximum heart rate was 192, and that was amazing. I also used my Kuros training hub to figure out where my resting heart rate, where my low end was. And it's been kind of hovering around, 50, around 58, sometimes 56. So I used that to also, or actually I didn't, but Kuros did, to figure out all of my zones. So you can take, for an example, 192 for your maximum heart rate. You can take 192, you can minus your resting heart rate, which I used in this case was 58, which gave me a heart rate reserve of 134, okay? Now, if I were to do my calculations to say 60% and then 70%, I would take 134 multiplied by 60. That would be my max intensity, right? Then I would add my heart rate reserve, which would give me 60% of my maximum heart rate, which would be 138, okay? And then 70% would be 152. Now that, guys, is a far cry from my Maffetone pace, okay, of 133 to 138, or 138 if I added in that 5 beats, 138, and then had that range of 10 beats, 128 to 138. That would be my MAF heart rate, and 138 to 152 would be my zone 2. So as you can see, zone 2 kind of puts me into a whole new bracket, okay? So then you kind of go, well, Dave, did you just continue doing MAF, or are you going to start to switch? Now, this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the video, which I thought was important for you to understand. This heart rate reserve is a fantastic thing because it's not taking your age into the equation. What it's doing is it's actually taking your fitness, it's taking your high-end heart rate, your low-end heart rate, and you're able to figure out what your zones are based on that. That's why I like heart rate reserve, because the Karvin formula kind of takes all that into consideration, and you're able to come up with numbers that make a little bit more sense than just using the Maffetone method. Look, I'm not bashing the Maffetone method. It works. I get it. I've been using it for a long time. But now that I've been able to figure out what my max heart rate is, like I think I missed out on an opportunity a number of years ago. If I spent the time to figure out where my maximum heart rate was, look, there's tests you can do. You don't necessarily just have to use your watch. In this video right here will explain what some of those tests that you can do to figure out your max heart rate. But I thought this would be a really good talk to you to figure out how you could set up all of your heart rate zones. So for me to you, I would say that for Karvin formula, using your heart rate reserve, I think that would be a good way to come up with your heart rate zones that I think would be more accurate. MAF is amazing to start off with, but you can slowly work your way up to start using your max heart rate and your resting heart rate to figure out where your zones should be. I like it, it works, and I think I'm gonna just continue to do it. And I think it'll help you guys if you want to improve in your running. Adding in a little bit of speed work is always a good thing, right? But if you don't have your heart rate zones figured out, knowing what those zones are to be able to push faster can be a little confusing if you haven't figured that portion out. If I were to use the 220 minus my age, right? And then also use the heart rate reserve, right? The Karvin formula, there would be a difference of 34 beats to 31 beat difference on my upper and my lower end, respectively. That is astounding. It blows my mind. So I always believe it's important to always continuously learn. Also, have an open mind. Don't get stuck in your way thinking one way is going to be it. You have to be open. And I am an open individual. I really do strive to learn, to try to be a better version of myself each and every day. Sometimes it doesn't always happen. Sometimes I have relapses. But, you know, looking at the numbers, I mean, that would be a good 20 beat difference. And the thing is when you get older and that number, if you used it, 220 minus your age, it would just get lower and lower and lower, but it wouldn't reflect where your fitness level was. So I believe your fitness level is what should eventually determine where you should be calculating your heart rate zones. You may not get there at first, right? You may have to go through a few things. If I was starting out all over again, I would still use the MAF. I would still use my MAF numbers, okay? And then based on that, then I would eventually figure out how, where my fitness level is at, so that way I could apply that. That's what I would do if I was starting all over again. Now, the other thing that you would need to understand, like I said on one of my previous videos, is Dr. Phil Maffetone had mentioned you don't always have to change your MAF number because you get older each year. You can continuously use this MAF number as long as you're getting faster over a period of time. If you start to see some plateaus or whatever, or you're regressing or you're not improving, every 5 years you may want to take a look. Once you find your MAF number, you keep it. You keep it for a number of years, and you continuously use that then as long as you're improving. But if you're not improving anymore, then you may have to reduce it a couple of beats. It's just an arbitrary number to keep you out of the injury box, so to speak. And it does work. Just don't overdo it, because then you could, struggle with the overtraining side of things. And this video right here, I think, will help you understand the Karvin formula a little bit more. Like I always say, get out and run, guys.